Hey guys! Tonight, we saddle up beneath an endless dome of twilight sky. You're surrounded by the quiet hiss of campfire embers and the gentle snorting of Mongol horses, their shadows flickering in the firelight like ghosts from a forgotten war. You're not in a city. You're not even near a village. Just steppe. Open, infinite, slightly crunchy underfoot, and, if you squint, you can almost see the glowing trails of stars, mirrored in the beaten earth beneath your boots. A wool-cloaked herder hums as he pours something from a leather pouch into a wooden bowl. The liquid fizzes. It's not wine. It's fermented mare's milk, Irog, the Mongol drink of choice. You take a sniff. Your eyebrows instinctively retreat halfway up your forehead, funky, sour, a bit like yogurt that's seen things. And the person handing it to you? Their smile says, drink, or be disrespectful. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Always fun to see the sleepy map of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch near the flames. Across from you, a warrior pulls off his boots and begins massaging his horse's legs. Not in a cute way, but with practical urgency. To the Mongols, horses weren't just animals. They were extensions of the body, partners in survival, engines of war, and sometimes living refrigerators, which sounds odd. But hang tight, we'll get there. Here's the first surprise. The Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire in history, wasn't built on castles or wheat fields or rivers. It was built on grass. Miles and miles of dry, stubborn grass, and not the good kind either. Mongol horses didn't have the luxury of rich pasture lands. They ate whatever scrub grew on the steppe, sparse, crunchy, and sun-blasted. But here's the kicker. They thrived on it. Your feet sink slightly into the soil. It's dry, dusty, almost flavorless, like stale popcorn. And yet, this dirt once carried the hooves of 100,000 horses across Asia. How? Because Mongol horses were absolute beasts. Not in size, they were short and stocky like overachieving ponies, but in endurance. They didn't need oats, they didn't need grain. All they wanted was open space, harsh weather, and a few frozen tufts of grass to gnaw. Their secret weapon? Efficiency. These horses could digest coarse vegetation better than almost any breed in the world. Mongols didn't breed for beauty. They bred for guts, literally. The better your horse processed food, the farther your army could ride. Simple, ruthless, surprisingly effective. And here's your reality check. You probably wouldn't survive this campaign, by the way. Most didn't. But let's not dwell. Now picture this. Each warrior had up to 5 horses. Not for prestige, but for rotation. You ride one until it's tired, switch to the next, and let the others graze. It's like having 5 car batteries you cycle through daily, except they neigh and occasionally kick you in the ribs. You reach out and touch one. Its coat is thick, shaggy, warm like an oven. It shudders slightly, and you feel the ripple of muscle under all that fluff. No show ponies here, just living tanks with surprisingly cute ears.
And they're more than transport. They're storage. You're carrying dried meat, spare arrows, ropes, even tent poles, strapped to the sides like a medieval Uber Eats. Let's pan back for a moment. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Empire would have worked without this horse-grass symbiosis. Was Genghis Khan a genius because of strategy, or because his army ran on the most sustainable energy source in history, scraggly plants and tough ponies?
Oh, and here's a fun tidbit. Mongol horses could find grass under snow. No, really. They'd paw through drifts with their hooves, sniff out buried plants, and chomp down like it was buffet night. That gave the Mongols a wild winter edge. Most armies huddled in fortresses when snow hit. The Mongols? They thrived. Their horses didn't need hay barns, just instinct. Back at the fire, that leather pouch makes another lap. You pass on the irog this time. Your stomach is still emotionally processing the smell. One of the warriors nearby laughs. Gently. No pressure. But also slightly judging you. It's okay. You're from the future. Your digestive system is soft now. Nearby, 2 horses bump noses. One farts impressively, then settles down to munch grass like it's the most important task in the world. And maybe it is. Because out here, when the sun sets, when your entire empire is mobile, and when the nearest city is 3 weeks away on horseback, the thing that matters most isn't gold, or titles, or silk. It's whether your horse pooped today. You're already feeling it, aren't you? The pace slowing, the air cooler, the fire lower. This empire doesn't shout. It hums, through hooves, grass, fermented milk, and 5 identical horses with names you probably can't pronounce. And tonight, they'll carry you across empires, one clop at a time. The air smells like dry grass, leather, and just a trace of horse sweat, the kind of aroma that might make a modern traveler wrinkle their nose. But to you now, in this timeless Mongol twilight, it smells like power, like momentum, like history grinding forward on 4 legs and a belly full of hay. You stir in your thick wool blanket and glance at the horses dozing nearby, legs locked, eyes half shut. Even while sleeping, they're standing, ready. Because in this world, a resting horse isn't a luxury. It's the entire empire on standby. See, you're starting to get it now. What horses eat, empires digest. And nowhere is that more literal than in the Mongol world. Genghis Khan didn't just win battles with brilliant tactics or brutal discipline. He conquered with logistics, and those logistics began inside a horse's belly. At first glance, feeding an army of horses across thousands of miles seems impossible, especially without modern feed, supply trucks, or even reliable roads. But the genius of the Mongol system was in how little it relied on things. It relied on space, grazing land, constant movement. The very ecology of the steppe became part of the battle plan. You trudge behind a caravan of riders now. The hoofbeats are hypnotic, almost melodic. Each step represents trust, that the land ahead will provide just enough, that there will be water, that the grass won't be who grazed, that your horse can keep eating, because if it doesn't, you stop. The whole empire stops. Other empires built fortresses. The Mongols built momentum. Here's something fun to imagine. An average Mongol army during peak expansion might require over 400,000 horses. Yes, 400,000. That's not just a lot of animals. That's a national resource plan. And the grasslands had to keep up. If they didn't, the consequences were catastrophic. But we'll get to that panic-inducing scenario later. For now, picture this. You're a quartermaster under Ogedei Khan. Your job? Figure out how far 60,000 troops can go before the horses start losing weight. It's not about human food at all. Your maps don't show roads. They show pasture quality. Your reports include detailed notes like grass dry but plentiful, or too many herds passed last week, move north. It's like managing a food truck fleet, but the food is the land itself and the trucks are alive and poop everywhere. Historians still argue whether this equine diet dependence was a strength or an Achilles heel. Did it give the Mongols an unmatched freedom to roam, or did it secretly chain them to their ecosystem in ways that made overexpansion inevitable? You take a deep breath. The air here isn't crisp. It's dusty, slightly gamey, and tinged with that constant background tang of milk that's been somewhere. It's what a Mongol general would have smelled before deciding whether to press on to Persia or pivot back toward the Yellow River. You hear one of the herders. That's training, sure, but also trust. Mongol horses weren't just durable, they were loyal in a way that bordered on eerie. Raised free range from birth, they recognized their rider's voice, scent, even mood. A good horse knew when you were injured, when to bolt, when to wait. They were, in a real sense, your second brain, and also your heating system during harsh winters. Now here's a weird one for you. Mongol horsemen sometimes bled their horses for protein. Yeah, in harsh conditions, they'd make a small incision in the neck vein and drink warm blood, mixing it with water or milk. And before you gag, know this: it was considered respectful. The horse didn't die, it just gave a little bit, like donating plasma for the empire. You walk quietly now, your feet padding over crunchy grass. Above you, hawks wheel in lazy spirals, and on the horizon, a line of yurts appears like mushrooms after rain. The camp is already bustling with routine. Horses being rubbed down, saddles inspected, bits soaked in water to soften. And in the center, a large felt tent where the decisions are made. Not by priests or nobles, but by warriors with horse nutrition reports. That's right, the weight of the empire could be swayed by how much grass horses consumed yesterday. Not just in battle strategy, but in where to conquer next. Let's get specific. The Mongols famously used a system of relay stations, called yam, across their vast empire. These outposts allowed messengers to switch to fresh horses and cover up to 200 miles in a single day. But guess what? That only worked if those horses were fed, which meant hay, water, and rest had to be pre-arranged across thousands of miles. And suddenly, horse feed wasn't a boring logistics problem. It became diplomatic currency. Local lords or vassal states were required to maintain pastures and stockpiles. Failure to do so wasn't just rude, it could mean losing imperial favor. Or, your head. You pause near a trough, where one of the horses is nibbling something weirdly mushy. It's not just grass, it's a mixture: chopped shrubs, crushed grains, and a dash of salty mineral. Not every horse got this. Only the top-tier ones, the war horses, the messengers, the Khan's personal ride. Mongol horse diets weren't one-size-fits-all. They were tactical. And now you're realizing something quietly wild. The empire's very shape, its curves, its reach, its weird, jagged frontiers, wasn't drawn by maps or ambitions. It was drawn by where the horses could eat. Mountain ranges that lacked pasture? Avoided. River valleys full of reeds and water? Invaded. It's bedtime history, so we won't yell it, but this horse diet shaped history as much as any sword or treaty. And still, those horses chew, night after night, grass in, conquest out. You settle in beside one, watching the slow rhythm of its jaw. This isn't just dinner, it's the fuel of emperors. You wake to the sound of hooves. Not galloping, but that slow, rhythmic clop of horses moving just enough to remind you they're always working. You sit up in the pre-dawn glow. Around you, the horizon is barely a suggestion, a smear of pale blue over endless grass. The fires have died to warm embers, the warriors are already up, and the horses, still chewing. You stretch your arms and trudge past a few riders pulling gear out of saddlebags. One pours something thick and beige into a shallow bowl for his mount. It looks gross, like goat cheese left in a sauna. The horse, unfazed, slurps it down with the energy of a creature that's never been told no. Welcome to the curious menu of Mongol horse cuisine, featuring today's special, goat fat logic and grassy guts. You walk a bit further and squat beside a group of young warriors brushing down their horses. One of them offers you a lump of something from a pouch. It's dry, brittle, smells like salty leather, and crumbles between your fingers. You ask what it is. He grins. Horse snack. You pause, halfway to biting. For me or the horse? He shrugs. Either. You eat it. Mistake. See, the Mongol approach to horse feeding wasn't just practical, it was deeply intertwined with how they saw nature, fate, even warfare. The grasses of the steppe weren't just vegetation, they were a kind of contract between the Mongol people and the land. If the grass grew, the gods were pleased. If it withered, something had gone wrong. Time to move, time to sacrifice, time to adapt. Mongol horses survived on nothing. Where other armies dragged wagons of oats and feed, Mongols let their horses eat whatever the wind hadn't blown away. Their digestive systems were like biological grinders, able to pull nutrients from shrubs, thorny weeds, dry grass, even frozen roots. All they needed was time, movement, and a little mineral salt. And yes, salt was a big deal. Riders would often lead their horses to salty patches of soil where the animals would lick the ground like giant fuzzy slugs. It helped with hydration, digestion, and maybe even mood. Some riders swore a good salt lick made a horse smarter. Probably placebo, but hey, empire morale matters. Here's your fun fringe fact. Some Mongol horsemen believe certain plants made their horses faster. Not stronger, not healthier, faster. There were entire micro-traditions about which herbs to let the horses nibble before battle, depending on the direction of the wind, the phase of the moon, and whether or not you dreamed of white sheep the night before. Historians still argue whether these beliefs were tactical rituals, inherited folk science, or just riders making things up to feel less anxious about charging into a Hungarian pike wall.
Then he walks it over and pours a small amount onto the grazing patch. You watch. The horse sniffs it, then eats. Why? In cold or barren conditions, fat was a survival booster. Just a spoonful of extra calories might mean your horse makes it through the week. It wasn't every day, but it was strategic.
Mongol horses weren't pampered, they were tuned like engines.
And the grass? Well, it wasn't grass like you'd imagine on a golf course. This stuff is tough. Wire-thin, yellowed, grows in clumps like rejected hair plugs. It crackles under your boots. Yet, here comes a mare, happily chomping it down like it's gourmet salad. You watch her work. The mouth movements are intense. Sideways grind, slow chew, swallow, repeat. Horses don't vomit, by the way. Did you know that? All digestion is forward motion. One bad bite and that's it. They power through. Kind of like empire expansion. And speaking of power, Mongol horses didn't just graze. They stored energy. Literally. Their bodies layered fat reserves during good months and then burned them when forage was scarce. Some modern scientists believe this natural rhythm gave them more endurance during long campaigns than even modern cavalry horses. Their very biology was seasonal strategy. So when we say, what horses eat, empires digest, it's not just poetry. The horses were backup food, backup fuel, backup morale. When things went bad, a well-fed horse meant the difference between escape and death. A rider nearby pulls out a brush and starts combing the horse's side. The bristles scratch through dust, dander, and dried sweat. It smells like warm hay and damp leather. Not unpleasant, actually, just very hoarse. The sun climbs now, lazy and gold. A few young foals stumble around, trying to copy the older horses. One eats a beetle by accident and sneezes dramatically. Another tries to nibble your blanket. Cute, but in 10 months, those little fluffballs will carry warriors into cities whose names they'll never pronounce. You sip from a leather flask. It's not arag this time, thankfully. Just water steeped in boiled roots. Tastes like pine needles and mud. But it keeps you awake, which is good, because another quirky fact's coming your way. Some Mongol herders chewed grass to test its quality. Not because they were hungry, because it helped them understand how digestible it might be for their animals. Yeah, taste testing horse salad. If it felt too stringy, too bitter, or dry in the mouth, they'd move the herd on. Mongol wisdom wasn't always scientific, but it was relentlessly observational. And so, you keep walking, one hoofbeat after another. The landscape never really changes, but that's the point. It's the same grass, the same wind, the same horses. Reliable, predictable, enough. And that enough conquered the known world.
You pause by a stream where a few horses are drinking. One dips its head into the water, then raises it slowly. The sun reflects off its wet muzzle. Steam rises. Its ears twitch toward the east. It's time to move again. But don't worry, the horse is eaten, and that means so has the empire.
You're riding now, not galloping, but in that relaxed Mongol trot that carries you for hours without breaking your spine. The horse beneath you moves like it's been doing this since the dawn of time. And honestly, it probably has. These aren't newfangled thoroughbreds with attitude and dietary needs. These are steppe machines, bred for battle, wind, hunger, and silence. The morning mist curls around your ankles as you ride into a cluster of yurts, each one smelling faintly of smoke, wool, and, you guessed it, milk. But not just any milk. This is Irog territory now. A rider hands you a wooden bowl. You know it's coming. You brace. You sip. Yep, still fizzy. Still weird. Still somehow both sour and buttery, like yogurt left in a leather bag, fermented during a bumpy camel ride across time. Fermented mare's milk, Irog, was the Mongol equivalent of Red Bull, except instead of taurine and synthetic sugars, it offered lactic acid, alcohol, probiotics, and a mild buzz that made you feel like you could fight a bear or recite poetry, sometimes both. But make no mistake, this wasn't just a drink. It was cultural rocket fuel. You wipe your mouth and watch as a young herder milks a mare by hand. It takes finesse. Mongol mares don't give up milk easily. You need trust, rhythm, and a bucket that doesn't leak. The milk is warm, slightly frothy, and immediately whisked into a leather bag where the fermentation begins. That bag, hung by the yurt's door and shaken by everyone who walks past, like a living smoothie. Now here's the fun part. Irog wasn't just hydration. It was nutrition, medicine, celebration, even a diplomatic tool. When envoys visited a khan, they'd often be offered a bowl as a sign of respect. And if you refused it, that was risky. Turning down fermented mare's milk in the great khan's tent was the medieval version of ghosting someone on national television. But you're a polite time traveler, so you keep sipping. Historians still debate how much Irog actually boosted physical performance. Some argue it had electrolytes and hydration benefits, especially in dry conditions. Others say it was mostly symbolic, a morale drink. Either way, Mongols consumed gallons of it. Whole camps smelled faintly of tangy milk and horse breath. To outsiders, it was overwhelming. To Mongols, it was home. You walk now toward a storage yurt. Inside are bladder skins of Irog, tightly sealed, sloshing slightly when bumped. The fermented drink needed to be kept cool, stirred often, and consumed fast. If left too long, it could go from fizzy to feral. One Mongol joke involved giving expired Irog to disobedient children or unwelcome visitors. You don't want to know what happened next. But it wasn't just for parties. Mongol warriors drank Irog on the move. They'd carry small leather flasks and sip during long rides, restoring energy.
Though not from Irog itself. Don't worry, no drunk horses here. But from the mare's diet. The better the mare ate, the richer the milk. The better the Irog. So yes, even your fermented beverage quality depended on what the horses were grazing. That's right, the Empire's beverage of choice was grass-powered. Eat that, oat milk. Here's your fringe detail of the night. In some ceremonies, Irog was poured onto the ground as an offering, not to waste it, but to bless the earth, a symbolic reminder that life comes full circle. The grass feeds the horse gives milk, the milk becomes drink, and the drink returns to the soil. Kind of beautiful, right? Now, take a moment and imagine this. You're in a Mongol command tent. The general is laying out the next conquest, maybe the edge of Persia, maybe the gates of Kiev. Maps are unrolled, fingers jab the parchment. And what's in every officer's hand? A bowl of Irog. Not just for hydration, but for unity. It's a shared culture, a common taste. Every sip reminds them who they are, where they come from, and what they're fighting for. The steppes, the sky, the horse. And you can't help but notice, it's all circular. The yurt is round, the bowl is round, the horses move in loops. The Empire doesn't build straight roads. It pulses outward in concentric migrations, always coming back to the grass, to the mare, to the milk. Outside, children race on foals barely taller than goats. One tumbles, the others laugh. An elder leans against a post and watches, sipping Irog with the serenity of someone who's lived through 20 campaigns and 30 fermented summers. And over there, a giant bag is being shaken by a bored teen. Every few minutes they kick it for fun. That's the fermentation process, folks. No factories, no timers, just rhythm, patience, and a little casual violence. The sun climbs higher now.
You feel it in your scalp, that dry burn of thin air and sharp light. A breeze kicks up, smelling of manure, grass, and sour milk. Somehow, it's comforting. You drink again. The fizz tickles your tongue. This time, it doesn't taste bad. It tastes earned. This is what empires drink, you realize. Not wine, not mead, Irog. Alive, ancient, slightly alarming, and endlessly sustaining. And as the day begins, the yurt's empty. Riders saddle up, horses are brushed down. The smell of buttered curds and hoof oil fills the air. You pack your things, your bowl is refilled. The trail waits, and with each sip, each hoofbeat, each breath of this fermented wind, you realize, this empire runs on milk.
You're trotting again, this time behind a column of riders. The morning is brighter now, shadows sharper, and the breeze carries the scent of leather, sweat, and cheese. Not fancy brie or blue vein Stilton. This is Arul, rock-hard, dried milk curds that double as battlefield snacks, and let's be honest, dental challenges. One rider beside you pulls a piece out of his bag, holds it between his teeth, and just lets it soften. No chewing, that would be foolish. These things are like chewing on fossilized yogurt. You take one for yourself. It tastes aggressively dairy, sour, salty, slightly creamy, and very committed to being unmeltable. Welcome to the saddlebags of the Mongol warrior, where snacks are as rugged as the steppe itself. But what's fascinating is this. The human rations these warriors carried were directly inspired by what their horses ate. Dried meat, hard cheese, fermented drinks, fat-rich gruel. It's like a paleo-survivalist's dream menu. If that survivalist had to ride 100 miles, fire arrows at full speed, and sleep under a horse blanket. You peer into a few bags as you ride. They're not organized, they're not neat, but they're deeply efficient. Every item is there for a reason. Meat for protein, curds for calcium, fat for energy, milk for hydration. Nothing perishable, everything portable. And some of it, shareable, with horses. That's right. Mongol warriors often fed their mounts the same dried grasses and salt cakes they carried for themselves. In winter, they'd mash meat into the horse's food, not because the horses liked it, though some seem to, but because every calorie mattered. One mouthful could be the difference between collapse and survival. You ride alongside a younger warrior now. His bag is open. You see, a strip of jerky tied with sinew, a bundle of dried herbs, a cloth-wrapped brick of arul, a small flask of clarified butter, a pouch of fermented grain mash, basically Mongol trail mix, and next to it all, a stone knife. Because out here, if your snack needs cutting, you better have tools. Mongol cuisine didn't care about convenience, it cared about endurance. One fringe detail you'll love, Mongols believed that chewing arul while riding kept the mind alert. Some even swore it helped them aim arrows better. Probably placebo again, or maybe just a side effect of trying not to chip a molar. But it's not just food, it's strategy. The Mongol army's ability to carry weeks of rations without supply wagons made them faster than any enemy. They didn't need resupply. They were the resupply. Their horses grazed, their food didn't rot, their bags stayed light. They could vanish into the hills and come back stronger, leaner, still fueled by nothing more than meat and milk. Historians still argue whether this minimalist food system was intentional genius or inherited necessity. Did Genghis Khan design this logistics miracle, or did he just use what the steppe...
You reach into your own pouch now, trying to mimic the routine. The arul still tastes like creamy limestone, but you let it sit. After a while, it's oddly pleasant, like a flavor memory of every dairy product you've ever known, compressed into one concentrated bite of we're not here for fun. Ahead, the caravan stops. Time for a rest. Horses are unsaddled, rubbed down, water skins passed around. And now you see it. Something subtle, almost ritualistic. Each warrior takes a tiny piece of their food and sets it aside. A pinch of meat, a crumb of cheese, a drop of butter on the ground, not out of wastefulness, but as an offering to the spirits of the land, the horses, the ancestors. You follow suit. one crumb of dried curd. The wind picks it up, it's gone. But it feels respectful. By someone is boiling water over a tiny fire. From a pouch, they pour in toasted millet, butter, and a bit of salty curd. The result? A kind of warm gruel that smells like breakfast and battlefield mixed together. It's called sagan idia, a general term for white food, sacred and practical. You're handed a bowl, it's thick, cozy, slightly funky. You eat it fast. Then it's back on the trail. You realize, not for the first time, that Mongol warriors lived almost entirely out of their saddlebags. No kitchens, no markets, just whatever fit on a horse. And somehow, that wasn't a limitation. It was power. The empire didn't rely on roads or depots. It relied on gut instinct, literally. What your horse ate, what you ate, where the grass grew, that determined the pace of conquest. And when things got desperate, there were backup plans. Some warriors carried dried blood cakes made from slaughtered animals, boiled and mixed with flour. A protein bomb, shelf-stable, and deeply unsettling to imagine. But it worked. The sun climbs higher now. You pass herders tossing salt cakes into the grazing fields. Horses munch. Warriors sip arag. The world keeps turning, and it all feels so circular again. Nourishment in, energy out, empire forward. And through it all, your saddle creaks, your snack bag rustles, and the horse beneath you keeps moving. Not because it's commanded, but because it's fueled. Grass-fed, curds packed, battle ready. You wipe your hands, close the pouch, and pat the horse aside. You're not just riding history anymore. You're digesting it. The land begins to change not in appearance exactly, but in feel. The grass grows thinner, the breeze rougher. You're moving into drier territory now, and the horses notice before you do. Their ears twitch more often, their pace slows just slightly. Every movement now has weight. Like they're doing the math in their heads. How far to the next pasture? How much left in the tank? You tug the reins gently, and your horse veers a little toward the north, sniffing at a patch of yellowed grass. Just a ace maybe. A few choose to hold it over. This is what the Mongols called the portable pasture problem. You see, in most medieval armies, movement was based on strategy. Distance to the enemy, defensive terrain, supply lines. But in the Mongol Empire, movement was often dictated by the grass. Not metaphorical grass, literal, scraggly, crunchy, slightly sour grass. Your next conquest could only happen if your horse had somewhere to eat. No pasture, no progress. It was that simple, and that complicated. This empire didn't need roads. It needed meadows. You ride past a group of scouts squatting in the grass. They're not looking for enemies, they're checking the root systems, pulling up tufts, examining the moisture, crumbling the dirt in their fingers. These are steppe soil whisperers. They don't use calendars, they read grass cycles. One of them gestures with 2 fingers. Northward, better grazing up there. The column adjusts, you follow. Just like that, a military maneuver has occurred, triggered by root health. Historians still debate how formal this system was. Were there assigned pasture scouts? Rotating grazing maps? Secret grass ranking protocols? Some say yes, others believe it was a mix of common sense and generational instinct. Either way, it worked. The horses led the way. In a very real sense, their health, their appetite, their hooves in the dirt, they decided the fate of cities, kingdoms, civilizations. You pause for water at a shallow stream. Around you, warriors unsaddle their mounts, letting them roll in the dirt and wander toward any edible clumps. It's not rest time, it's refueling. And now, something subtle clicks into place in your mind. This isn't a cavalry force, it's a moving ecosystem. Thousands of humans, horses, sheep, goats, dogs, all moving across continents with no centralized base, no castles, no wheat silos, just grass. Grass and rhythm. You reach down and grab a handful, dry, crumbly, the kind of thing your houseplants would sue you for offering. And yet, your horse lowers its head and munches it with visible enthusiasm. One of the older riders grins and leans in. This grass, he says, is good. Short, bitter, strong. You raise an eyebrow. Strong? He nods. Makes the horse's blood thick. Makes him brave. Science probably disagrees, but the poetry? Flawless. The Mongols classified grasslands based on their resilience and regrowth cycles. Flat, green plains were used sparingly. They were the dessert of the empire. Instead, they often fed their horses on tougher lands. Why? Because a strong horse raised on hard grass was more adaptable. In the Mongol mind, feeding your horse too well made it soft. And nobody wanted a soft horse on the front lines. Here's your fringe fact. Some military leaders in the empire issued grazing orders, like actual directives, saying, "Don't overgraze near this riverbank. Save it for autumn." Logistics? Sure. But also ecological awareness, centuries before anyone coined the term. The Mongols knew what overgrazing could do, and they didn't need satellite data to figure it out. You start to notice something else now. The ground is littered with old dung, dry, cracked, harmless. But to a trained eye, it's a sign. This field has been used recently. Horses have eaten here, maybe even last week. Time to move on. This is the portable pasture problem in action. If you're a rival ruler sitting in your stone castle, you might wonder, why are they attacking now? The answer? Because their horses are full. It almost makes you laugh. All your city walls, archers, oil vats, useless if you forgot to factor in clover bloom timing. A soft joke passes through camp. A young herder shouts, "This grass is too sweet. Our horses will get lazy." Everyone laughs. It's obviously a joke, but also not entirely. That's the psychology here. Tough land builds tough beasts. Tough beasts win empires. You swing back into the saddle. The sun is high now, and the wind kicks up dust trails as the camp begins to move again. Not in panic, not in rush, just the daily migration of momentum. And somewhere inside you, the realization settles. The Mongol Empire wasn't mapped on parchment. It was mapped on pasture rotation. It was charted in hoofprints, not borders. It moved with the grass, and it only stopped when the grass stopped growing.
The sun begins to slide toward the horizon, throwing long shadows over the steppe. The heat retreats, and the land cools fast, the way deserts do when the light goes. You're still in the saddle, and so is everyone else. There's a rhythm to it now. Ride, graze, rest, ride again. You're part of a living river that flows wherever the grass permits. But this evening, something's off. Your horse starts to hesitate. Others do too. You look down, and the grass is gone. Not barren, just too short. Grazed to the root. Dry. Gray. A brittle crust that crunches under hoof, but offers no real nourishment. You've just stumbled into the overgrazed zone. And now, the problems begin. The Mongols were grass managers as much as warriors, but even the best can be blindsided. Sometimes the herd size outpaced the regrowth. Sometimes rival groups pushed into your pasture. Sometimes the rain just didn't come. And when that happened, Mongol expansion didn't just slow, it cracked. You stop. Around you, a quiet tension sets in. Horses paw at the dirt, annoyed. A few try nibbling, but there's nothing there. One rider clicks his tongue in frustration. This is bad. Not arrow in the eye bad. Worse. This is the silent threat. No fuel. And in the Mongol world, no fuel meant no empire. You dismount. One horse is sweating despite the cold. Not from heat, but stress. A hungry horse moves differently. Its ears droop. Its tail twitches at nothing. It looks at you not with affection, but with expectation. Fix this. You can't. The herders gather. They murmur about moving north, maybe following that dry riverbed to a patch near the hills. But it's risky. That path leads into contested land. Another tribe grazed there last month.
They left dung, fire pits, broken arrow shafts, signs of trespass. In Mongol steppe politics, grazing without permission wasn't just rude, it was an act of war. Historians still argue whether overgrazing played a direct role in the empire's eventual fragmentation. Some say yes, especially in the western khanates. As population centers grew and horses multiplied, grassland pressure increased. Others argue it wasn't environmental strain, but political division and succession chaos. Either way, the grass was the canary in the empire's coal mine. Tonight, the camp settles reluctantly. No one's laughing. The cooking fire smells the same. Meat, curds, broth. But the mood is brittle. A few warriors talk in low voices about splitting off, scatting new grasslands, maybe taking the risk to cross into better pastures. But that means splitting the herd, fragmenting the army. And that's a dangerous precedent. You see it now, how fragile this whole system really is. An empire built on grass isn't weak. It's elegant, efficient, but it's also vulnerable to scarcity. One dry season, one over...
That's the nightmare scenario. Being caught in a campaign when the horses can't eat. Imagine it. You're deep in hostile territory. You've ridden for days. Your supplies are low. Your mounts are skinnier every morning. They wheeze when they walk. And then, the enemy strikes. Not with swords, but with terrain knowledge. Because while you were reading maps and counting arrows, they were watching the grass. In fact, some rival kingdoms began practicing scorched pasture tactics, burning their own fields, salting grasslands, even moving flocks through strategic zones to strip the land before the Mongols arrived. They didn't have to win the battle. They just had to starve the engine. You walk among the horses now. A few are lying down, not resting, conserving energy. This isn't laziness. This is calculated survival. A young herder offers you a lump of softened arul. You share it with your horse, crumbling the curd into its feed bag. It nibbles half-heartedly. Not enough. Nearby, a group of elders debate. One wants to cull weaker animals. Another suggests moving by night to find unclaimed grass. A third says nothing, just stares west toward darker land. All options carry risk. But doing nothing, that's slow death. Here's a fringe fact. During extreme scarcity, Mongols sometimes made emergency rations from chewed cud. Yeah, recycled from a horse's own mouth. Not often, not proudly. But when options vanished, pride did too. And now, you understand something profound. Conquest wasn't just about arrows and tactics. It was about biomass management, about timing your invasion to match seasonal growth, about feeding, not just your army, but your army's transportation, your heaters, your milkers, your blood donors, your horses. A gust of wind rattles the dry grass. It sounds like paper. Your blanket flaps, someone sneezes. Silence. And then, a shout. A scout returns. He's pointing north, waving a bundle of fresh grass in one hand. Thick, green, wet with dew. Found it. The mood flips like a coin. Saddles are packed, fires stamped out, riders remount. The entire camp flows toward hope. It's not a battle. It's not a siege. But it might be the most important maneuver of the month. Because if you can't find food for your horses, it doesn't matter how many arrows you carry. The empire ends where the grass ends.
You ride fast now, not in fear, but in anticipation. The air is sharper, cooler. The horses pick up speed, hooves striking the ground with new purpose. They can sense it. Fresh pasture is close. And there it is, a shallow valley, quiet and untouched. Lush green carpets shimmer under low evening light, dotted with wildflowers and taller patches that wave like flags in the wind. The herd practically sprints toward it, and no one stops them. Why would you? This is salvation. You slow your horse just before the slope, let it choose its path, and it begins grazing before you even dismount. The crunching sound is instant and steady, like a hungry engine revving back to life. You've arrived at what the Mongols might have called a life patch, a small, fertile haven in a sea of scarcity. These areas were often scouted weeks in advance, memorized, protected, even passed down in oral tradition. There is a bend in the river, behind a row of crooked trees. The grass there is always thick after the first frost.
that kind of thing. Imagine it, an empire that moved like the wind, but remembered exact locations of grass. That's not just mobility, that's ecological memory. A warrior leans on his saddle, chewing something green and coarse, and gestures with his chin. "This is why we live," he mutters. You nod, because this is the moment. After weeks of riding, hunting, rationing dried curd and boiled meat, this valley feels like a feast. For the horses, and, indirectly, for you. The camp sets up quickly but quietly. Fires are lit, pots unpacked. One rider even starts singing, low and slow, a tune with no real beginning or end, just a wandering hum. It blends with the crunch of grazing, the snorts of content horses, and the rhythmic clinking of gear being unbuckled. It's hard to believe that just 2 days ago you were staring at dead grass and the edge of a logistical cliff. And now, the engine is back online. Here's something historians still debate. Did Mongol expansion follow pastures, or did they shape their conquests to fit pasture access? In other words, were they just lucky grass chasers, or did they conquer regions because they could feed their horses there? Some argue it's the latter, that many campaigns were designed not for gold or glory, but for grazing rights. Take the steppes of Eastern Europe, for instance. After the 1241 invasion of Hungary, Mongol forces didn't stick around the cities. They pushed into the Alfold, the great Hungarian plain, because it offered phenomenal pasture land. Coincidence? Not likely. You chew. It's almost cartoonishly joyful. You sip your broth and realize this isn't just a break, it's a reset. The Mongol army didn't march in straight lines. It pulsed, like a heart, expanding, contracting, pushing out in bursts, then falling back to regroup and refuel. That's what these valleys were for. Not rest, not luxury, survival between storms. Another rider laughs loudly. He's spotted someone trying to wrangle a mare that's more interested in running circles than being tethered. Horses here are not passive beasts. They're personalities, independent, moody, but deeply loyal. If a horse didn't like you, good luck riding it. But if it did, it would carry you into hell. You walk through the grazing field now. The grass is up to your knees in some places. Thick, healthy stalks with that sweet, sour smell of chlorophyll and dirt. You pluck a strand and bite it. Bitter. Useful. Nearby, a herder explains that this patch grows from spring-fed roots, meaning it survives longer in dry seasons. These kinds of details weren't trivial. They were imperial secrets. Knowing where to find water-fed pastures gave Mongol generals a strategic edge. A few days of extra grazing could mean faster horses, longer marches, and surprise attacks that rewrote maps. You wonder now, how many great victories began with a grazing detour? And then there's the other layer, diplomacy. Some of these life patches weren't unclaimed. They belonged to rival tribes, smaller khanates, or neutral territories. Negotiating access to these lands was a form of alliance management. Offering grazing rights could be a gift. Denying them could be a declaration of war. So yes, the politics of grass were deadly serious. Even now, 2 older riders sit cross-legged on a rug, exchanging small wooden tokens and muttering names. Not trade, not storytelling. They're rotating pasture rights for the upcoming season. Because even here, even in this moment of peace, the future of the empire is being negotiated by where the horses will eat next. You sit again near your mount. It's lying down now, belly full, eyes half shut. You scratch its neck absent-mindedly and feel it breathe against your palm. Warm, heavy, safe. This exact moment is what made Mongol dominance possible. Not just battles or speed, but resilience and rhythm. Knowing when to push, when to pause, when to let the land breathe. It's not a military secret. It's an ecological choreography, repeated over and over. From Mongolia to Poland to the Persian Gulf. And tonight, you get to witness it. The stars start to prick through the sky. Someone plays a two-stringed horsehead fiddle near the fires. A lullaby, low and echoing. You can't understand the words, but you feel the meaning. Feed the horse. Rest the warrior. The morning comes soft and golden, the kind that makes even your breath feel slow. You wake to the snuffling of a horse nuzzling your hair. Rude, but not unexpected. These animals don't care about personal space. They care about grass, salt, and the occasional curious sniff at whatever weird snack you fell asleep with. You sit up, brushing crumbs off your tunic, and look out over the valley. The horses are still grazing, but it's changed. They're slower now, choosing only the tallest stalks. The best has been eaten. This patch has been noted, marked, used, and that means it's time to go. You feel the shift in the camp before the first saddle is even strapped. Mongols don't wait until a place is barren. That would be foolish. They move before necessity becomes panic, always one step ahead of starvation. And here's the key: they don't just leave pasture behind, they rotate. You ride toward the edge of the valley, where a small group of riders are marking stones. One is etching notches with a knife. Another places a strand of braided horsehair on a nearby tree. These aren't just decorations, they're codes, messages left for other riders. This pasture was used in spring, will regrow by next winter. Or, herbs found here, good for sick foals. Or the less optimistic, overgrazed, return only after heavy rain. This is the rotational grazing network, a low-tech, decentralized, and brilliantly efficient system that allowed the Mongols to reuse land without destroying it. It's not sustainable in a trendy, organic farming sort of way. It's survivalist, flexible, empire-sized permaculture. Historians still argue how formal these systems were. Some say they were official records, knotted strings, carved wood tags, even portable maps made from dyed felt. Others believe it was all oral, passed from elder to herder, from camp to camp, like folklore with real estate applications. Either way, the system worked, for centuries. You follow a younger scout up a ridge. From the top he points toward the horizon, 3 distant patches of color. One pale green, one golden, one dark with trees. Each is a future stop, already known, already categorized. He doesn't say much. He just taps the side of his head and grins. Memory is your map now, and not just pasture memory, seasonal memory. The Mongols had no strict calendar like you'd know it, but they had phenological markers, biological signs that told them what season they were really in. The first yellow flower meant time to move north. The return of a certain bird meant switch to highland grazing. The growth of specific mushrooms? Time to harvest wild medicines or relocate the sick horses. You pass a yurt now, just being taken down. A few children carry poles, a woman packs fermented curds into a skin bag with methodical focus. No one seems rushed, no one panics, because they've done this hundreds of times. Movement isn't a disruption, it's the default.
And the horses? They're already gathering themselves, full but restless. You mount up and watch as the column reforms. There's no drumbeat, no shouted orders, just hooves turning slowly eastward. Even now, you realize, everything is circular. Each grazing cycle reflects a year of life. Birth in the spring grasses, strength in summer's lush fields, endurance in autumn's dry patches, survival through winter's brittle weeds. Then return, repeat, and conquer between. It's not just clever land use, it's cosmology. The Mongols didn't divide time by months, they marked it by what the horses were eating. They didn't draw maps based on borders, but on routes of forage. Even their greatest campaigns, into China, the Middle East, Europe, had to account for rotation paths. You couldn't just keep riding west forever. You needed to come back, let the pastures heal, let the hooves remember their way home. And here's your fringe detail. In some regions, high-ranking warriors were assigned grazing stewards, not to manage their land, but to scout and maintain their grazing rights across vast territories. These weren't farmers, they were ecological logisticians,
ensuring your elite horses stayed elite. You think about that as your horse picks its way through a shallower slope now. The group rides in loose formation, strung out like beads across the plain. Someone near the back hums. A child rides in a basket, strapped to a horse's flank, chewing a strip of dried fat like it's candy. Everything is in motion, and yet nothing feels frantic. That's the core of Mongol power, you realize. Not just that they were fast, but that their speed had rhythm. It wasn't a sprint, it was an endless, grazing heartbeat, a cycle that could stretch from Siberia to Syria and still find its way back to grass. You stop at a hilltop as the sun begins to slide down again. The next pasture glows gold in the distance, kissed by the last light. It's waiting. And you understand now. Mongol strategy didn't ride on chaos. It rode on rotation, on memory, on leaving no hoof print too long in one place, and on always, always knowing where the grass will grow next.
The days blur now into hooves and wind and grass and repetition. You're in the flow, part of a machine older than maps, where movement isn't decided by generals, but by blades of grass curling in the cold. But today feels different. The land shifts again, subtly. Hills give way to wide open plains, the kind that invite a gallop. And when one rider breaks into a sprint, the others follow without a word. So do you. You lean forward and your horse launches like a thought made real. The sound is thunder on dirt. Your heart jumps with every stride. You're not just riding a horse, you're riding logistical genius. This isn't just fun. This is why the Empire moved faster than anyone else in history. And it wasn't just the horses. It was the relay system, a marvel of efficiency known as the yam. From the outside, it looked like magic. Messages delivered across thousands of miles in just a few days. Supplies waiting exactly where they were needed. Commanders halfway across Asia reacting to news like they had cell service. But the secret? Grass, as always. Let's break it down. The yam system was a sprawling network of relay stations, sometimes every 25 to 40 kilometers. At each station, fresh horses were kept, groomed, fed, and ready to go. A courier would ride one horse hard, arrive, switch to a new one, and keep riding. No delay, no need for rest, just pure velocity. You slow now, approaching a yam station, or what's left of one. A few weathered stones mark the site. A cluster of bones, probably horse, maybe goat, and the faint remains of a post pole where a courier might have hung a pouch of dried cheese for the next rider. The yam wasn't glamorous. It was grass-fed infrastructure, and it worked because the entire empire rotated around its logistics. The genius lay in its decentralization. Each station was stocked by locals, herders, families, sometimes monasteries. Their job? Keep the horses healthy, keep the supplies fresh, and in return, they got tax breaks, protection, or prestige. And yes, even the horses used for the yam had their own grazing cycles. They weren't kept penned. That would ruin their health. Instead, herders rotated them across nearby pastures, ensuring fresh legs at every stop. You walk now into the skeleton of an old rest hut. Inside, a flat rock once used for cooking still sits, blackened at the edges. Imagine the couriers who sat here, wolfing down salty porridge, washing it down with lukewarm irog, knowing they still had 300 miles to go. And here's your quirky detail of the night. Some elite couriers carried metal bells attached to their saddles, not for flair, for clearance. When people heard the bells, they knew this wasn't just a rider. This was a state priority. Get out of the way, open the pasture, offer assistance. You listen now.
But one thing's certain, it became the spinal cord of the empire, connecting places that had never been linked before. Through it, ideas flowed. Orders, taxes, military intelligence, even gossip. A rumor whispered in Karakorum could show up 2 weeks later in Baghdad, delivered by a dusty rider and verified by the markings on his horse's flank. You mount again, and imagine you're one of those riders. No possessions, no weapons beyond a knife. Just a saddlebag with dried curds, meat, a few coins, and a passport, a paisa, the official tablet that gave you authority to demand resources along the route. Paisa holders were like medieval VIPs. You needed food, they gave it. You needed a new horse? Done. You needed rest? They made space. Refusing was not advised. So yes, the Mongols invented a kind of priority lane courier system 700 years before FedEx. You ride on, your horse loping easily now. The path is marked by stone piles, hooves, sacred markers, and navigation points. You add a rock to one as you pass, just like the riders before you. A thank you to the sky spirits. Or maybe just a whisper to the horse gods. May the next pasture be green. Here's where the yam system comes full circle. It didn't just rely on horses. It protected them. At every station, the horses were allowed to rest, graze, rotate out. If one grew weak, it was replaced and cared for. Riders were trained to read signs of fatigue, to recognize when a horse's breath shortened, or when his sweat dried too fast. Why? Because the Empire's messages were only as fast as its horses were healthy. And healthy horses meant rotated grazing, attentive herders, time off between runs, and wait for it, nutritional variation. Some stations even supplied specific herbs to supplement horse diets. Think of it as steppe horse Gatorade. You smile at the thought. Mongol horse nutrition wasn't just survival, it was strategic policy. As the sun begins to dip, the next pasture emerges. Smaller than the last, but still good. You dismount, let your horse wander. You scratch its ears, and it leans into your hand, just a little. That's trust. That's partnership. That's infrastructure built on empathy. You sit, back against your saddle, and watch the horizon. Somewhere out there, a message is moving, and somewhere else, a horse is being prepped. The cycle never stops. The grass grows, the empire listens. The hooves keep falling, and through it all, the yam connects it all. A nervous system of grass-fed velocity, carrying the pulse of an empire that refused to be still.
It's another dawn, but now your eyes are sharper. You see things you wouldn't have noticed a week ago. Tiny color shifts in the grass, the way a horse's tail moves when it's stressed, the slight change in gait that means, I need a new pasture soon. You've become, slowly and without ceremony, part of the Mongol sensory system. Today, your group is moving towards something bigger. Not just a new grazing site, but a supply convergence point. You heard the whispers last night. Extra herds are being brought in. A stockpile is being built. That can only mean one thing: a campaign is coming. You follow the others up a ridge, and then you see it. A broad basin, almost bowl-shaped, dotted with white yurts and separate grazing zones organized like slices of a pie. In one zone, mares with foals. In another, draft horses used for heavier loads. Further out, the prized war horses. Sleek, alert, and already being walked in circles by teenage herders whistling in minor keys. This isn't just a grazing stop. It's a staging ground. And what powers this staging ground? You guessed it. Horse diets, grazing science, and rotational logistics so smooth it makes modern military supply chains look like kindergarten lunch duty. You dismount, hand your reins to a young boy, and walk through the camp. There's no yelling, no rush, just purposeful movement. Tents going up, curd being packed into hides, saddles being repaired with horse sinew. Everything built for mobility. You pass a large fire where a pot of borts, dried mutton, has been soaked back into stew. The smell is sharp, earthy, undeniably oily. You take a bowl. It tastes like salt, smoke, and long distances. Nearby, a general is speaking to a group of officers. He's not talking strategy. He's discussing herd rotation patterns. Which river valley to send the reserve mounts through? Which pastures to avoid due to overuse? One officer mentions a fungal outbreak spotted in western grasses. The general nods and immediately reassigns an entire herd. It hits you again. The Mongol army wasn't a beast of war. It was a managed ecosystem on hooves. Here's a quirky detail.
During major campaigns, Mongol generals sometimes ordered the horses to fast lightly a few days before a push. Not from cruelty, but because slightly hungry horses moved faster and were easier to control. The same way you might run faster when you're chasing a food truck. Motivation, step style. You sit and watch as horses are fitted with new tack. Minimalist but effective. Saddles are light, built for speed and archery. The stirrups are short, allowing warriors to stand and fire in mid-gallop. Some saddles even have secret pouches for food and dried blood cakes. Because who needs granola bars when you've got high iron jerky? Then you see something.
It's ritual grounding. When you live in constant motion, these tiny acts are anchors. Ways to orient yourself in a world without walls. You follow them up, slowly. At the summit, you see the full view. Hundreds of horses, all calm, all grazing in coordinated segments. From above, it almost looks like a logistical painting. Brown dots on green, moving just enough to show life, but not enough to waste energy. Historians still argue whether Mongol military supremacy was primarily due to tactics or logistics. Did they win because of the brilliant battlefield moves, or because their horses were always fed, rotated, and rested when other armies were stuck dragging wagons through the mud? Honestly, probably both. But logistics gets far less credit than it deserves. Take this for example. The Mongols knew how many horses each warrior needed depending on terrain and distance. A short raid, 2 mounts. A long push, 3 or 4. An invasion across continents, up to 5 horses per soldier, rotated daily for maximum speed and stamina. You realize, standing there, that Mongol speed wasn't magic. It was math. And every equation began with one variable: grass. Down below, a warrior is checking each mount's hooves. Cracks, infection, bruising, even minor issues could derail a campaign. That's why Mongols bred for tough hooves and fast recovery times, traits passed down alongside stories and battle scars. And when a horse became too old for combat, it wasn't abandoned. It was rotated to youth training or used for load bearing. Nothing was wasted. Even the milk from aging mares had a place in the nutritional web. Suddenly, a horn sounds, short, sharp. Not a war cry, just a gathering call. Riders begin to form lines, horses are sorted, orders issued. The staging ground has shifted into preparation mode. And in that moment, you feel it. Not fear, not adrenaline, just the quiet hum of readiness, of systems clicking into place, of an empire that knows how to feed, move, and fight without ever building a castle. Because who needs castles when your walls are built from miles of grass and your foundation is 1,000 moving stomachs? You walk back to your horse. It lifts its head, ears perked. It knows what's coming. You whisper to it, "Tomorrow we ride." And you don't mean it metaphorically. You mean literally, with full bellies, rested legs, and eyes on the horizon. The next morning starts with no fanfare. No trumpets, no drumroll. Just the quiet sound of riders cinching saddles, horses huffing mist, and yurts folding down like mushrooms shrinking in reverse time-lapse. This is departure day. Not because anyone says so, but because everything says so. Your horse is already alert. You feel it in its muscles, the way it leans forward slightly, anticipating motion. It knows the signs. So do you. Today, the army moves. But this isn't some chaotic rush. This is a biomechanical ballet. Riders don't bunch up. They flow, spaced naturally to avoid kicking up dust in each other's faces. Horses staggered to prevent trampling. Even the grazing fields are left clean, not just out of courtesy, but because leaving trampled or overused ground is a tactical tell. Enemy scouts read landscapes like books. You fall into line. The rhythm returns. Hooves tapping soft symphonies into the earth. You're heading east. Towards something no one says aloud, but everyone understands. Campaign season. And here's the thing no one tells you about conquest. It starts with logistical silence. The Mongols didn't declare war with banners or marches. They did it with saddle distribution charts, with increased mare milk production, with careful rotation of herd clusters to minimize overgrazing, before the army even moved. That's right, the prelude to empire-shattering raids? Grass prep. You pass a rider carrying a goatskin pouch filled with dried tatsai, a type of sour herb used to stimulate appetite in horses, reluctant to eat in unfamiliar grazing zones. Mongol vets, yes, they basically had those, knew that diet shock was real, and they handled it with herbal supplements centuries before modern equine nutrition was a thing. Meanwhile, a herder near the rear of the formation keeps glancing at the sky, not for omens, but for cloud patterns, watching for shifts in wind direction that could affect grass growth along the route. If it rains too much in one valley, it might flood the root systems. If too little, the grass could turn to dust. Historians still argue whether this level of environmental attunement was passed down formally through training or absorbed through daily life. It's probably both. You don't build the largest contiguous land empire in history by winging it. You do it by reading the world beneath your hooves. And now, you enter the zone of rotations, a term no one says aloud but everyone operates by. This stretch of land, maybe 200 kilometers wide, is divided mentally into seasonal cells: summer pastures, autumn reserves, winter zones near rivers with frost-hardy grass. Every rider knows which cell is usable, which is closed, and which was borrowed last year with a little too much enthusiasm and a lot of political fallout. There's etiquette here too. One rider tells you quietly that his clan is still trying to apologize for overgrazing a spring valley 2 seasons ago.
It's like accidentally parking your car in someone else's driveway. If your car pooped 100 pounds a day and ate everything in sight. You laugh. He grins. Then gets serious. Pasture law, he says, is older than Khan's. You believe him, because here's your fringe fact. The Mongols had oral grazing treaties, negotiated agreements with tribes, families, and sometimes even enemies about when, where, and how long herds could stay in a given territory. Break the rules and retaliation wasn't always swords. It could be grazing sabotage, moving your herd to poison a pasture, overfeeding just to deny future use. Ecological warfare, medieval style. You ride past one such site now. Looks like an innocent field, but the grass is yellowed unnaturally, the dirt churned up. Locals whisper it was salted 2 years ago after a betrayal. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone avoids it now, like a cursed kitchen. By midday, the sun is high, and the horses need rest. The army doesn't stop all at once. It pulses, like a breathing creature. Some riders dismount early, let the horses graze in light rotation. Others push further, aiming for that extra patch near the river bend. Every stop is a calculation. You drop to the ground near a shaded spot, pull out your water skin, and take a long drink. Your horse, already nibbling, doesn't even notice. That's a good sign. Another rider joins you. She's older, with a weather-beaten face and a decorated quiver slung across her back. She points toward your horse's flank. That one's eating fast. You'll need to rotate soon. You nod. He likes the soft shoots. She smirks. They all do. But too many and he'll bloat. Balance the soft with the bitter. And there it is again. The Mongol way. Warrior advice as grazing strategy. Or maybe it's the other way around. Soon, word passes quietly. The next staging point is only a few hours ahead. Riders remount. The movement resumes. You look out and realize the path behind you is invisible. No trampled roads, no burned fields. Just a slight impression, quickly erased by wind and time. That's by design. The Mongol army didn't just want to move fast. It wanted to move cleanly, to leave no obvious trail, no signs of herd health, no data for enemy scouts. Even horse dung was sometimes collected or scattered. It's all part of the biological stealth of the empire. You glance ahead and see smoke curling up over a low rise. Campfires. That's the next temporary base. Horses will graze, leaders will confer. Maybe a small detachment will split off to scout or raid. But everything depends on how the grass is growing there. The day ends with no ceremony. You unsaddle, rub down your horse, let it roll in the dust. The routine is so seamless now, it feels more like ritual than labor. And you sit, bowl of curd in hand, staring at the skyline where tomorrow's pastures lie. You feel the hum of potential, the quiet logistics behind legendary speed. This army won't wait for its moment. It will ride straight through it, hoof deep in grass, stomachs full, and eyes fixed on the next rotation. The night is silent, except for the occasional grunt of a resting horse or the soft shift of leather tack as someone stirs in sleep. You lie wrapped in your felt cloak, body buzzing with the kind of tired that only long-distance riding can give you, but your mind still galloping. You think about what you've seen, hundreds of riders moving like a single thought, horses grazing with military precision, and a system so invisible it might as well be myth. But it's real. It's all powered by something simple, soft, green, and mostly overlooked. Grass. And this grass has one more secret role to play, because now you're entering a different zone. Not just another pasture, but a supply vault. A reserve of fermented forage, dried fodder, and emergency horse feed. Yeah, the Mongols had that. Because when your empire stretches from Korea to Kiev, you can't just count on the grass always being there. Sometimes, you have to bring the pasture with you. You rise with the others before sunrise. The air is sharper here, higher elevation, thinner grass. Not ideal, but still usable. You're moving toward one of the imperial fodder caches, a kind of mobile warehouse tucked into natural shelters, cliffsides, or tree-covered ravines. Only the inner circle knows all their locations. Even locals don't always know they're there. And when you reach this one, it's like opening a portal into empire maintenance. Bales of dried grass are stacked under hides, tucked into natural alcoves. Some have been treated with mare's milk to increase shelf life. Weird, but it works. Others are packed with herbs for specific regions where horses might suffer mineral depletion. A herder is already distributing feed in measured amounts. These horses aren't starving, but this cache ensures performance, not just survival. This is your mainstream fact. Mongol military logistics weren't reactive, they were preemptive. These supply points weren't just for emergencies, they were fueling stations, placed with near clairvoyant precision. And how did they know where to build them? Based on multi-season grazing data, passed orally, refined over generations, they could predict where grass would fail months ahead, so they stored the solution where the problem hadn't even started. Modern armies use spreadsheets. The Mongols used hoofprint calculus. You help scoop dried grass into a nose bag. Your horse snorts with interest, tail flicking in approval. You can tell it likes this mix, richer than wild pasture, full of nutrients. You smell it too, earthy, a little sour, and oddly sweet. Another writer tells you that some of these rations are mixed with ground bones or ash, not for flavor, but for calcium balance. The grass in this region is known to be low in certain minerals. Too long without them, and horses develop brittle hooves or weak tendons. So yeah, bone dust smoothies. Yum. You look around at these caches, the efficient feeding, the rotating grazing zones, and realize sieges weren't the test of Mongol strength. They were the test of Mongol supply lines. You remember that famous siege of Baghdad, or the long push into Eastern Europe? All of them hinged not on battering rams, but on how well the horses were fed on the way there. Historians still debate whether these caches were state-sponsored or clan-managed. Some believe the Khans ordered them directly.
Others argue they were grassroots, no pun intended, efforts by local commanders. Either way, they became essential. Like rest stops, if your road trip covered 3 time zones and ended in an attempted conquest of Hungary, you pack up again by midday. This time, the horses are extra frisky, fed, rested, and itching to move. You mount and join a smaller group heading toward a river pass, where scouts reported ideal grazing conditions and shelter. The trail narrows, dust rising behind you. You notice something now. The horses don't just obey, they guide. They lean toward better footing, avoid dusty patches, even nudge each other towards smoother paths. These animals aren't livestock, they're co-pilots. You pass another herder who carries a pouch filled with mineral licks, hardened clumps of salt and clay. When horses are pushed hard, they need more than grass. They need supplements. Mongol herders knew which lakes produced the best salt, which riverbeds had iron-rich mud. They moved between these spots like medieval nutritionists on horseback. And, yes, you bet this information was closely guarded. These weren't just secrets. They were life insurance policies for armies on the move. A well-fed horse lived longer. A longer-lived horse meant fewer replacements. Fewer replacements meant faster campaigns. It all loops back into the same tight cycle of grass, movement, conquest. As you approach the river, the terrain opens again. A long, flat bank of silver-blue water surrounded by tall reeds. You dismount and let your horse drink. It gulps greedily, then lowers its head to nibble on the reed grass. Tougher, but decent enough. You notice the reeds have been cut previously. Someone was here, harvesting, prepping feed, maybe building an impromptu yurt frame. Mongol movement wasn't invisible. It was layered, like footprints in sediment. And every one of those layers was soaked in intentionality.
You sit again, leaning back against a rock, warmed by the sun. You look at your horse, now belly deep in reed grass. You think about those hidden fodder caches, about fermented milk curds and bone dust snacks, about high-altitude salt lakes and rotation zones older than cities. And then you think about every map you've ever seen. Not a single one shows what really made the Mongol Empire unstoppable. The invisible lattice of grazing, memory, and nutritional engineering. You breathe in. The air is cool, wet. Your horse flicks its ears toward you, content. You whisper to no one in particular, "We brought the pasture with us." And in that moment, you know you could ride forever. The days stretch like the horizon itself. Vast, endless, a quiet rhythm of hooves, grazing, watering, and watching the weather like it's a living enemy. You don't need a calendar out here. You feel time in the horse's bones. And today, the air has a strange weight. You wake early. The sky is overcast, but not stormy. Just a vast gray lid, like the land is being pressed down. Even the horses seem more alert. They graze, but glance up more often. Something is coming. A messenger rides in just before dawn, breathless, coat soaked with sweat, his own and the horses'. You're summoned to join the main force. Movement is accelerating. Deployment phase. You mount without question. No one needs to say it, but everyone knows this is the final preparation before contact. Whatever or whoever that might be. Whether it's a fortress, a city, or just a negotiation with show of force backup, the horses have to be at peak condition. And that means one last crucial stage in the Mongol horse diet cycle, the short-term performance boost.
You arrive at a convergence zone, a wide, shallow basin with grass like velvet and water from a slow-moving stream. Around you, dozens of herders are already at work, feeding warhorses a special blend. Dried grass soaked overnight, curds mixed with salty broth, and, your fringe fact for today, a dash of blood. Yep. In certain regions and during specific campaigns, Mongol commanders ordered small amounts of horse blood added to feed. Not enough to harm the animals, just enough to stimulate appetite and provide a boost of iron and protein. It sounds dramatic, but it's surprisingly efficient. Blood was seen as both sacred and strategic, a life source that fueled stamina. You watch a herder tap a jug with practiced care, mixing a splash into a wooden trough. The horse doesn't flinch, it eats. Nearby, another rider checks hooves with a carved tool that looks like a twisted spoon. He scrapes gently, murmurs something, then moves on. Every horse is being inspected like it's a living engine. And it is. This is the cavalry's pit stop. You dismount and help rub down your horse. Its coat gleams now, thanks to careful grooming and a winter diet that included extra fat from sheeptail grease. A weird-sounding supplement, but one that kept coats waterproof and skin strong. Mongols didn't just feed their horses, they winterized them. You move among the lines now. Riders polish tack, replace reins, distribute salt lumps, and pressed hay cakes wrapped in hide. The energy isn't frantic, it's ritualistic. Everything must be right. You don't win speed, strength, or silence on the battlefield. You build it here.
Others point to early form of proto-veterinary triage, but all agree. The Mongols knew which horse would survive a siege and which would die in the first sprint. You sit beside your mount now, running your hand along its flank. The muscle flexes under your palm, ready. You nibble a hunk of dried milk paste and think about the weird beauty of it all. Conquest powered by milk, blood, herbs, and hooves. No factories, no paved roads, just carefully optimized four-legged nutrition plans disguised as a nomadic lifestyle. And here's your final logistics twist of the day. These horses, they don't all go into battle. Some are placed ahead, stationed miles beyond the point of contact, hidden in river bends or forest edges, like living backup batteries. If the battle stretches on, or if the front moves too fast, those fresh horses are waiting, already fed, rested, prepped. It's not just planning, it's parallel nutrition supply chains. You stretch your back and glance to the ridgeline. A scout returns, dusty, grinning. The path ahead is clear. The other force, whoever they are, isn't ready. You almost feel bad for them. Because this isn't a ragtag horde of hungry men. This is a four-legged freight train of grass-fueled fury. And it's about to roll through history like a storm you can't see coming until it's too late. But here's the last joke of the day. Even now, just hours from possible conflict, the horses still graze. No one's pushing them. No one's forcing battle prep with whips or commands. The warriors wait for the horses to eat, because until they're full, the army doesn't move. And that's the secret, isn't it? Not speed, not surprise, not savagery, but discipline of diet. A quiet, unwavering loyalty to the real timeline. Not clocks or calendars, but the rhythm of hooves and hunger.
Wait!
You lean against your saddle, breathing in the smell of warmed leather, river reeds, and the sharp tang of fermented milk. You close your eyes and picture the map in your mind, not dotted with cities or rivers, but with pastures, salt licks, and secret feed stations. You don't know who you'll face tomorrow, but you know this. You'll get there faster, strike harder, and leave before anyone can follow. Because your horse is fed, trained, rotated, and ready. And that's what builds empire. You ride at dawn, but not in a charge, not yet. The movement is smooth, almost lazy if you didn't know better, but everyone knows better. This is the quiet before a thunderclap. Horses walk at a measured pace, conserving energy. Riders speak only in murmurs. Eyes scan the horizon, not for enemies, but for grass quality, slope angles, water sources. Because even now, in the hours before confrontation, logistics leads the charge. You've crested a ridge. Below you is a wide valley, low grass, good visibility, a stream slicing through the center like a silver thread. Scouts have already grazed horses here earlier in the week. You saw their marks yesterday. Subtle hoof turns, a bit of dung near the western edge, scraped lichen on a rock. The site's been approved. Grazing begins again. And in the middle of it all, a row of replacement mounts, tethered loosely and already nibbling their way through breakfast. Some are war horses, others are pack animals, designated to carry arrows, tools, even yurts if needed. It's not that the Mongols bring everything with them, it's that they've already placed what they'll need ahead of time. Think of it as logistical foreshadowing. Here's your mainstream fact. Before a major assault, Mongol commanders routinely sent out teams to prep grazing sites and rest zones for weeks in advance. These weren't minor efforts, they were full logistical missions, with vet specialists, herders, and scouts. You water your horse. It drinks like it hasn't seen a stream in days, even though it had one last night. Hydration behavior changes before battle. Horses can feel tension. They mirror it. One rider jokes that he gives his horse a pep talk before a fight. Not that it understands, he says, but I think it helps him think I do. You think back to something your host told you days ago, before you even reach the main column. Horses know the rhythm before we do. If they get nervous, be ready. And sure enough, yours is twitching more than usual. Not panicked, just listening. So are you. Nearby, a small group of riders gather around a flat stone. On it, they've laid out curd discs, dried wild onions, and pressed milk skin, lightweight, high-energy rations. Mongol trail mix. Some add a few sprigs of mint. It freshens breath and calms the stomach, for both rider and mount. You pop a curd into your mouth. It tastes like chalk dipped in vinegar, but it'll keep you upright at a gallop for hours. No frills, just function. And here's your fringe detail. In some elite units, horses were trained to graze in formation. Sounds wild, right? But imagine you're on a campaign, deep into unfamiliar land, and you need to be ready to ride instantly. Random grazing equals scattered troops. Trained grazing? The cavalry can launch within moments. Did the horses learn formation grazing through drills? Or was it simply their instinct, shaped by the Mongol rhythm? You lean toward the latter, because out here, instinct is training. The sun is higher now, burning off mist from the valley, and across the ridge comes a rider. Fast, straight-spined, waving a short flag, blue silk. The signal's clear, final alignment, the grazing ends. Horses are mounted. You rise with the others, legs fluid from days of riding. The horse doesn't wait for command. It moves as your body shifts, anticipating, responding. This isn't a tool beneath you. It's a co-conspirator. And just like that, you're moving. Not at a gallop, but in a steady, deliberate line. From above, it would look like a snake of muscle and will, slithering toward its prey. But even now, you're watching the grass. Because if this goes long, if the push stretches into days, you'll need to circle back, find new pasture, rotate the mounts. You may conquer today, but if your horses aren't grazing tomorrow, you'll never get home. That's the secret no one writes down. The reason the Mongols lasted so long, spread so far, and move so fast. They never stopped thinking about the next meal. For the horse. Empires crumbled because of ego, bad diplomacy, political coups. But the Mongols? They built theirs on forage, rotation, respect for the land, and deep knowledge of what a mount needs when running for weeks across the steppes. You reach another rise. Below, a city wall shimmers in the distance. Someone calls a halt. The army pauses. And behind the lines, horses start to graze again. Not for long, just a few minutes. A final charge of calories. It's not superstition, it's math. Feed before fight. You exhale, grip the reins, watch as the formation begins to shift. Your horse's ears twitch toward the sound of movement. Its nostrils flare. It's ready. So are you. Not because of courage, not because of destiny, because of diet, rotation, and a system older than borders. The charge hasn't begun, but it will. And when it does, the hooves won't just crush resistance. They'll ride on centuries of accumulated knowledge, stamped into every clump of grass between Mongolia and the Mediterranean. Your horse steps forward, so does the empire. The thunder fades. Now the hooves are still. The grass is quiet. The wind hums across the plain like a low lullaby, soft and constant. You lie beneath the stars again, wrapped in a thick cloak, your horse sleeping nearby.
The Mongol Empire wasn't just speed or violence or legend. It was rhythm, a quiet intelligence, a whispered conversation between rider, horse, and earth. And in that softness, there's something beautiful. Because in the end, all they wanted was motion. Not conquest for glory, but movement to survive. To return, to rest, to ride again. You feel your breath slow. The stars blur a little, your fingers unclench. Out in the dark, a horse snorts gently, then goes quiet. The night folds over you like a thick quilt. The grass sways, the wind hums, and your thoughts dissolve into the steppe. You're not a rider anymore. You're part of the rhythm. Good night.